Okay, let's make sure this is happening. Yep. So we'll start with this one. And I've said this about 100 times here. I really expect a question like this year, where they give you like weird functions and have you manipulate them or derive them or talk about how to combine them and stuff like that. We've actually done this question before, I think, but we'll go through it. So they're giving us three functions. Okay, they give us f of x, which we can derive, and we can't integrate that, but we can derive it. Okay, they give us a table for g, which tells us the derivatives and also the y value. So we can use MVT and IVT for that, okay, or just pluck values off of that. And then they give us a graph for h. And remember, given a graph for h, we can derive it. H prime of x is just going to be the slope of any line segment, because they're all just line segments there, okay, depending on where they want you to find the derivative. And if you had to integrate h of x, you'd have to find the area. Now, I don't think they're going to do that in this question. It looks like it's all derivatives. But that's how you would do it from a graph, okay? So the first question says, find the slope of the line tangent to the graph of f at pi. That's just the derivative, right? So for a, we need f prime of x, which isn't too bad. Just remember the chain rule and all these like little rules here. It's -2 sine of 2x, right? Because derive cosine, you get negative sine, and then chain rule happens, plus cosine x e to the sine x. And they want us to drop a pi into there. And this is why I made y'all do trig all year long with those little bullet quizzes. At pi, so when you plug a pi into 2x for the sine, this whole thing just becomes 0. Okay? So it's basically 0 plus, when you plug a pi into cosine, y'all know you get -1, and sine of pi is 0. So that's just -1. Okay? And as always, if I mess up, let me know. That looks about right, right? Okay. B says find k prime of pi, and they're giving us this new function. So this is just a chain rule, all right? They're plugging f into h. So k prime of x is just h prime of f of x times f prime of x. So it's a little border here. All right, and that's a chain rule. That's how you drive that, right? The outside function, leave the inside, multiplied by the derivative of the inside. So we need k prime of pi, which is h prime of f of pi. But f is this. So to find f of pi, we just plug pi in. You're going to get cosine of 2 pi, that's 1, plus e to the sine of pi, that's e to the 0, which is also 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. So we need h prime of 2 times f prime of pi. But we already found f prime of pi in the last question. So h prime of 2 comes from this graph up here. That's the graph of h. Here's 2. And it doesn't matter what that y value is yet, but h prime of 2 is just that slope, which goes over 3 down 1. So the slope there is -1/3. Okay, so it's -1/3 times f prime of pi, which was -1. So we're going to get +1/3. That's part B. Part C, again, they're making up some weird function just for no reason and asking you to find the derivative of it. So we want, I'm going to do it up top here to give myself a little room, but we want m prime of 2. So first we'll find m prime of x. Now when you're doing this, kids, on the actual test day, don't be all over I'm all like helter-skelter with my placement of stuff. I'm just trying to find room. You should do this normal, like neatly and in order and all that. And make sure you read the guidelines for answers and everything before the day of. All right. But m prime is going to be the product rule and the chain rule. So we're going to derive this first. So that's going to be -2 g prime of -2x. That's the chain rule happening, times h of x, plus, leave the first function, derive the second function, h prime of x. And that's all happening up here. And whoa there, Chief. And they want us to do m prime. All right, pen, what are you working like halfway for? There we go. They want us to find m prime of 2. So we're going to plug a 2 into there. So m prime of 2 is -2 times g prime of -4, which they're going to give us, times h of 2, which we have to find from the graph, plus g of, we're plugging a 2 in, right? Yeah, -4 times h prime of 2. Okay, so just going through there, it's -2 times g prime of -4 is right here. -1. They just gave it to us. H of 2. So sometimes students are like, well, I don't know what value. H of 2, you can see from the graph, is this point that I've highlighted right there, right? Let's zoom in on that. Sometimes students are like, well, I don't know what y value that is like a half, I don't know. You don't need to guess. If the slope, find the slope of the line, right? The slope is definitely negative 1/3, right? Because it goes down 1 over 3. All that means is every time you go over 1, you go down 1/3. So that's negative 1/3, down another third. That has to be negative 2/3, if you didn't know that. So H of 2 is negative 2/3. Plus, and all we're doing is finding all the crap they want me to find. G of negative 4 comes right from this table. That's just a 5. Just pay attention to what variables you're working with and how you're going to find everything here. Just make sure you know what you're deriving, I guess. And look out for chain rule. Very easy to forget that. But H prime of 2 already found. That's the slope there, which is negative 1/3. And like we said on the AP test, you can leave your answer just like that. And if I were you, I would, as long as it's all arithmetic. Okay? And then part D. Is there a number C in this interval such that G prime of C equals negative 4? So when they ask you this like existence stuff, like is there a place where this happens? It's going to be either IVT or MVT. Okay? IVT happens when they give you values for the function they're asking about. So because they're asking me about G prime and I have a table of G prime values, I can look and see if G prime ever goes from below to above negative 4. And if you look at this, it doesn't. It's negative 3 to negative 1 to 4, 1, negative 2, negative 3. So G prime in the data we're given never ever goes below negative 4. Okay, so we can't use IVT to show it. But, and here's just the kicker, they're trying to trick you. If they ask you about G prime and they give you values for G, then you can use MVT. Because remember what mean value theorem says. It says the average rate of change of G, right, whatever that happens to be, the derivative will have to equal it somewhere. Okay? So I know it's weird. They give you values for G prime, and a lot of times students want to use IVT, which you should. But if they also give you values for G, you got to worry about MVT. And it's not going to be super difficult because whatever interval they give you, negative 5 to negative 3, okay, the average rate of change is like 99% of the time going to be the value you want it to be, negative 4. So if we look from negative 5 to negative 3, if we find the AROC of G, that would be this, G of negative 3, G of negative 5, over negative 3 minus negative 5, which happens to equal. G of negative 3 is 2, minus G of negative 5 is 10, right from the table. And 3 minus negative 5 is 2. Well, that's negative 8 over 2, which happens to be negative 4. So because, now we got to write this out still, but because the average rate of change of G is negative 4 on that interval, the derivative G prime must equal negative 4 somewhere by mean value theorem. That's the basic gist of this. Okay, but we got to write the conditions. And for this to work out, we need G to be continuous and differentiable. Cool. And they tell me G is differentiable, so it must also be continuous. Whoa there, zooming in. Okay, so we're going to write that out here. Actually, I'll type it up just so it looks a little nice. But so, okay, because G of X is differentiable. Then don't say it. Then G of X is also. I know it's redundant, but just say it. Just name the function you're talking about. Is also continuous. Since, and I would put, I'm going to write this out here just because I don't feel like typing. Since G of negative 3, I know we just wrote it on the other side. You can also write the average rate of change in words if you want. But since this is negative 4, right? Let's see if I can get this to work out. Since that happens, there must be an X value where G prime of X equals negative 4 on the interval that was specified. What was that, negative 3 to negative 5, all the way around, negative 5 to negative 3, by MVT. Okay, so you state the conditions, right? Hey, G is differentiable. It's also continuous. The average rate of change is -4. There must be a place where G prime equals -4 by MPT. All right. So that's that whole question. I'm going to shut this down so we can record another.